screen. So I feel a lot of pleasure with both of these introductions. I hope I can live up to these words and not disappoint any of you. You know, you'll have been used to hearing from Rajvihari Prabhu, and he's very different from me in terms of personality, as well as our teaching styles are very different. So you may find that it'll take you a little time to get used to my style. I may not stop every 20 minutes. I may stop after every half hour or something. I like to present a concept and then pause in between for some questions. But feel free to just raise your hand and stop me anytime, and I'll try to keep it as interactive as I can. Okay? So I'm very, very grateful to have this opportunity. I think all of you are very learned devotees, and we have a super excellent organizer, Navadvip Sachi Mataji. And it's so wonderful. Yesterday I was reading just the introduction to ISOPANISAD, and I'm just appreciating, you know, these fundamental core books that Prabhupada asked us to do Bhakti Shastri. And although they seem like, oh, this is basic or something, but really, you know, they are such foundational essences that each time you read them, you know, you get something more. You know, yesterday too, I was like, wow, you know, I never caught this point before. So these are really wonderful books. And I'm very grateful to all of you for taking this study very systematically. Srila Prabhupada, as you know, wanted us to study nicely. Here's a little quote from a letter. In this way, you have to understand by studying carefully the philosophy. We have so many books, and I want all of my disciples to read them carefully. Soon we shall be instituting Bhakti Shastri examinations, and all Brahmanas will have to pass. So utilize whatever time you find to make a thorough study of my books. And all of you are doing that, so congratulations to all of you. And I won't read this whole letter, but just the highlighted part here. I want all of my spiritual sons and daughters will inherit this title of Bhaktivedanta, so that the family transcendental diploma of Bhaktivedanta will continue through the generations. And this is so important that that we really go deep, and that this knowledge, value, skills, you know, all of it really passes on from generation to generation. Because otherwise, just hold on just 1 second here. Okay. Yeah, so you can see in this chart, it's a very important chart. Here in the first generation, that is Srila Prabhupada, he of course knew what was his intention. He knew the context in which he was speaking something and giving certain instructions. The instructions were very clear to him, and he knew how to deal with the issues at hand based on Shastra with clarity. And if we don't study Srila Prabhupada's book systematically, what can happen in course of time is what's depicted in this chart, that, you know, they may not, the intention of Prabhupada may get lost, although the context may be known and the instructions, and, you know, you may be able to deal with certain issues. And then as you go down, Srila Prabhupada's grand disciples, the intention and context may get lost. And finally, as time goes on, all we are left with is the issues. And we don't have the proper context, or, you know, we don't have the proper knowledge of how to apply these in varied situations. So very important to study systematically. So I think you might have covered this. This is in your study guide books. There's 12 aims of Shastric study. Srila Prabhupada once said that if you have no goal, it's simply useless. And he gives the example of a ship without a rudder, or an airplane. So we need a goal. So I would really encourage all of you that you today or tomorrow sit down and make some goals for yourself of why you want to do this study. And it's very wonderful to make goals. You know, people who make goals, they actually achieve their goals much more than people who don't, make their goals or write down their goals. In fact, only I think 3% of people who don't write their goals, achieve their goals. So writing is something that's really important in Kali Yuga. It just clarifies things for us. It's kind of set in the paper and it just gives so much clarity. So please, write down your goals of study. And also, there's a nice verse. This is a verse. Somebody is unmuted. Can you hear clearly or no?
Yes, we're able to hear you, Mataji.
Okay, all right. I'm just now looking at the chat. All right. So this is a verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that describes actually a Kanishta Adhikari. And it's a very interesting definition, as you can see. A Prakrita Bhakta or materialistic devotee does not purposefully study the Shastra and try to understand the actual standard of pure devotional service. Consequently, he does not show proper respect to advanced devotees. He may, however, follow the regulative principles learned from his spiritual master or from his family who worships the deity. He is to be considered on the material platform, although he's trying to advance in devotional service. Such a person is a Bhakta Praya. Bhakta Praya means almost. So he's almost a devotee, not really a devotee. Or Bhakta Abbas. So like practicing devotee, shadow devotee, for he's a little enlightened by Vaishnava philosophy. So he's not actually a devotee, but he's called a devotee so that devotees accept him in their association. But the main point of showing you this verse is that a Prakrita Bhakta or a Kanishta Adhikari, he's not purposefully studying. He's, reading from here, reading from there. Sometimes his only reading is on the Facebook or WhatsApp messages, but he doesn't do systematic study. So he doesn't understand really the purports of our Shastra. And therefore, he's not able to fix himself. He's not able to apply himself in different situations. So there are 12 aims that you probably read in your handbook, but they're categorized in 3 ways. First is knowledge. This is like the classic. It's what, it's cognition or knowing what is what. And this is great. But then we all know a lot of things, but when it's time to apply them, we may not actually know how to apply properly in different situations. And therefore, we need some skills. So skills is how to. And then finally, we have the values and attitudes. Why? It's the whole purpose of why we want to learn this knowledge, have some skills, and then imbibe them imbibe them within us so deeply that it actually becomes a value, is that we want to please Krishna. That's the whole purpose. And very quickly, here is all the 12 aims categorized into these 3 things: knowledge, skills, values. So there's knowledge, understanding, and realization, or Shastra Chakshu, meaning seeing through the vision of scriptures. And sometimes we are very good at seeing through the vision, but then we are still not applying it, especially we see others doing some wrong things. And that's when we apply scriptures. See, this is what Bhagavad Gita says. This is what the Bhagavatam says. But we're meant to apply it in our own life. So therefore, there's personal application, then there's preaching application and theological application. And then finally, when the subject matter sinks in deeply, they turn into values. That is, our faith and conviction deepens, where able to accept the authority of Guru and Shastra very deeply. We can understand the mood and mission of Srila Prabhupada in different purports. And we're able to also apply academic and moral integrity principle. That's that, we don't quote out of context, and we're able to, we don't just take a part of the purport and, present it to suit our ideas or something, but we keep the integrity of the text and evaluating different situations in the light of Shastra and responsibility for learning. So here is some suggestions for study. I've just taken this, there's different ways you can put this, but I just took this from Urmila Mataji's study guide. I like it. So first is to read. Just simply read the mantra and purport. And this is actually the basis for our daily meditation. So she suggests 10 to 15 minutes. Maybe it's a little longer for some of us, 20 minutes to read, one mantra in ISOPANISAD. They're not too long, they're a few pages. And it's very important that all of you actually read before the class, because I'm not going to be able to read every single line. We'll read some sections, but it's important that you read ahead, because then when the class is done, you can really follow well. And then we have focus. So after reading, then you can take some main points of the teachings to be studied and think about them through the day, focus on them, and pray for realization, because spiritual realization, doesn't come just from knowing things and contemplating on things, but it's a lot of it is descending, not just by our endeavor. So pray for realization to come. And then consider these points through the day. Take some guiding thoughts or questions and just observe around you how you can apply these teachings around yourselves, in the world as you're living. And so this is like a day-long meditation. And then repeat also the realizations and insights in your own words. Either write them down, just write for a few minutes at the end of the day, or discuss with someone. Or some of you are artists, you can draw a picture, write a poem or a story, whatever means, just share in some way. Because what you share, it goes much deeper. And then finally, we have some questions in the homework and question bank. I encourage all of you to do them at your earliest. Don't leave them for the time of the exam. And I think Navdeep Sachi Mataji is very good at making sure that you submit your homework and all that. Okay, so we have some quick norms for the class. We'll arrive on time, we'll begin on time, we'll end on time, at the most couple minutes late, but not too much. And we shall not borrow strength from status or position. We're all equal here. We'll value all contributions, whether or not we agree with them. We'll observe confidentiality within and without the classroom, because sometimes we may have some practical exercises and people may share something personal. Please don't go put it on Facebook or Instagram the next day. We don't want that. Whatever is spoken here stays here in terms of personal matters. And each of us will accept full responsibility for success in achieving our desired outcomes, whether it's exams, essays, whatever. I've had, people in the past batches, sometimes they don't kind of keep up with the study. And in the end, they just ask someone for all the answers for their homework and question back, and then they just try to read the answers. So that's not fair. It's perfectly okay to ask for some help, or ask for suggestions and discuss and so on. And that's something I encourage also, that you form some study groups and do group study through the whole course. Very, very helpful. But take responsibility for yourself. Don't just leave things for the last minute and depend on someone else. And so sometimes we'll honor any agreement reached. So sometimes, because of life, perhaps I may need to change the time a little bit or the day, and if we decide on some agreement, I think we should all try to honor it to the best of our capacity. And we'll confront issues or behavior and not people. And when we do these practical group exercises and so on, we will respect the right of any individual to withdraw without stating reasons if anything makes them kind of uncomfortable. And we'll read the relevant chapter or section before each class. Is that all right with everyone? Any questions so far?
Yes, this is very good, Mataji. Very clear. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so now we'll get on with the book. So this is ISOPANISAD is a condensed treatise. It's a very special book, one of a kind amongst all the books Srila Prabhupada has given us. Has 18 mantras, and then there's an invocation and introduction. And in these 18 mantras, actually, the essence of the absolute truth is revealed. ISOPANISAD is part of the Yajurveda. And here is a little chart describing the Vedic literature. So we want to know, where does ISOPANISAD fit in the whole Vedic system? So you can see there's two broad categories. There's Shruti and then there is Smriti. So Shruti, it's revealed by the Lord. It's the sound form of Lord, and it's really non-different from the Lord, and it's transmitted by hearing. So it was first heard by Lord Brahma from the Supreme Lord. And there's some basic kind of differences between Shruti and Smriti. Smriti, of course, is something, literature that's compiled by the self-realized sages based on their realizations of the Shruti. So Shruti is composed in Vedic Sanskrit, and Smritis are composed in Laukika Sanskrit. That's like common kind of speaking kind of Sanskrit. So in the Vedic Sanskrit, the words have accents, much like, the notes in music and stuff. And like a particular word's meaning can drastically change just based on the accent of its letters. And so therefore, these words, especially Shruti, right? These words have to be heard properly from the Guru in disciplic succession. And therefore, Vedas are called Shruti. Shruti literally means hearing. And nobody has the authority really to change even a single syllable of the Shruti. They're passed on from one age to another, right? And sometimes there's a break in the disciplic succession, and Shrutis get lost because of this break in parampara. And what happens then? So again, the rishis or the sages, they hear them in trance. So the word rishi literally means a seer, or basically one who sees the Vedic texts. So he hears these Vedic texts in trance and he realizes its meaning. So the Vedic Sanskrit has its own grammar, and it's actually used only in Vedas, and no new book can actually be composed of this kind of Vedic Sanskrit, and it's complex grammar. I don't know too much about it anyway. And the Smritis, on the other hand, they're written in Laukika Sanskrit, or Sanskrit spoken by people. It doesn't have accents and so on. And literally, Smriti Shastras are compiled by remembering the meaning of the Shruti, and hence the name Smriti. Smriti means to remember. And Smritis are something that can change from age to age in their structure and their presentation. But of course, the essence remains the same, right? So we're not going to go into all the details of the chart, but you can see here, there's 4 Vedas we're all familiar with: Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, and Atharva Veda. And then due to different ways in reading and the different family traditions, there were different branches. So each of these 4 Vedas is divided, like the Rig Veda into 21 branches, the Yajur Veda into 100, Samaveda into 1,000, and Atharva Veda into 9 branches. And then each and every branch, as you can see in the chart, it has 4 subdivisions. So the Samhitas or mantras, they explain the different goals one can achieve, and also like the glories of going to different places and so on. Then the Brahmanas, they contain mantras and prayers. It is not referring to the person Brahmana, but it's referring to the division. So the sacrifices are explained, which are involved in achieving the places described in the Samhitas and so on. And then the Aranyakas, they explain also different aspects of the sacrifices. And finally, the Upanishads, they contain the philosophy behind all this. So there are 108 Upanishads, and Prabhupada lists all of them in Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela. I think it's 7:108 or 106, something, 108, yeah, 7:108. He lists all of the 108 Upanishads, and then he mentions that there's 11 important ones of them. And then Ishopanishad is the most important of all of them. So this is where Ishopanishad is. And then there is, just very quickly to the rest of the chart here, then there's the 4 Upavedas. Upavedas are like Ayurveda, that's medicine. There's Gandharva Veda, referring to music. There's a whole Veda on music. There's Dhanur Veda, or martial science, and then there's Thapatya Veda, that is architecture. And then there's the Vedangas, they're the limbs of the Vedas, which talk about pronunciation, the poetic meter. So that pronunciation, poetic meter basically help us like how to actually recite the Veda or speak the Veda. Then there is the then there's the etymology, that's Nirukta, and Vyakaran, grammar. So that describes how to understand the Vedas. And then there's the Kalpa, ritual, and Jyotish, which teaches how to use the Vedas. So at present, according to Jiva Goswami, he describes this in Tattva Sandarbha, at present, we only have 6% of the original Vedas available, about 11 Samhitas, 18 Brahmanas, 7 Aranyakas, and 220 Upanishads are available. So that's like less than 6% of the original Vedas. So how can we study the whole Vedas? If you study just a part of like a composition, can you get the essence of the whole composition? We cannot, right? You cannot just study one first chapter of Bhagavad Gita and say that, okay, I know Bhagavad Gita. You won't get the essence of Bhagavad Gita. So therefore, Jiva Goswami speaks in Tattva Sandarbha that, you cannot get the essence of Vedas now. And even the 6% of Vedas, we cannot actually go through them and understand them. There's no qualified Brahmanas to teach them. So what does Lord Chaitanya focus on? He focuses on the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a Smriti. It's a Purana. It's one of the Puranas, right? And for us, the literature written by our Goswamis, that is the most important literature, the most intimate knowledge of rasa. We can learn from that. And so for us, everything is Bhagavatam. And some scriptures, in fact, that our Goswamis wrote, they are so esoteric and so elevated that Jiva Goswami actually personally buried them in a samadhi. If you've been to Sanatana Goswami's Samadhi temple in Vrindavan, so behind the Samadhi Mandir of Sanatana Goswami, there is like one in the corner, there is one Samadhi, which is Grantha Samadhi. And so actually our Goswami literatures are so elevated, they can give us the highest knowledge about rasa. And Jiva Goswami understood that some of this can never be understood by anybody in Kali Yuga, so he actually buried them. And then on the Smriti side, there are 20 Smritis, not all of them are listed here. They're listed in Yajnavalkya Smriti, I believe. I've never read it, just information. So there's Itihasas, which all of us are more familiar with. Itihasas are the Ramayana and Mahabharata. And Bhagavad Gita is, of course, part of Mahabharata. So, but Bhagavad Gita was spoken by Krishna. So Bhagavad Gita is considered to be a Shruti inside Smriti, right? It's in the category of Smriti because it appears in Mahabharata, but then it's spoken by Lord directly. So it's a Shruti inside Smriti. And then there is the Puranas. So the Puranas explain the teachings of the 4 Vedas in story form, and they make everything easy for all of us. And there's 18 Puranas. There's 6 in the mode of goodness, 6 in passion, 6 in ignorance. And of course, the Sattvika Puranas are the best of all. And of all of them, Srimad Bhagavatam is the best Amala Purana, untouched by any of the modes. And Jiva Goswami, of course, he goes through all these in Tata Sandarbha and really establishes why Srimad Bhagavatam is the literature for all of us in Kali Yuga. And then there's the rest, there's the tantras, there's 64 kalas or traditional arts, there's 18 vidyas, and there's pancharatra, there's darshans, there is the 6 darshans. And then you can see here in the bottom, there's something called Nyaya here, which is basically the Vedanta Sutra. So you might have heard the word Prasthanatraya. Prasthanatraya basically means the main sources of scriptural evidence. So typically Prasthanatraya, if you even look up in Google, you'll find that it consists of Bhagavad Gita, the principal Upanishads, and the Vedanta Sutra. So here it's just listed as Vedanta Sutra, but typically Prasthanatraya is the Nyaya section. And these are the 3 called as Prasthanatraya. So that's a little summary. And after reading about or hearing about all this summary of the Vedic knowledge, we may ask, do we really need the Vedas? Why do we need the Vedas? We need the Vedas because a conditioned soul, he cannot revive his Krishna consciousness by his own effort. But out of Krishna's causeless mercy, he compiled the Vedic literature and its supplements, the Puranas. So we need the Vedic literature. And we can only understand the Vedic literature through Guru and Shastra and Sadhu. So let's quickly read this. The forgetful conditioned soul is educated by Krishna through the Vedic literatures, the realized spiritual master and the super soul. Through these, he can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead as he is, and he can understand that Lord Krishna is his eternal master and deliverer from the clutches of Maya. In this way, one can acquire real knowledge of his conditions, of his conditioned life, and can come to understand how to attain liberation. So these Upanishads, they were studied in Gurukul, and these little boys, they would actually learn all the Upanishads and just learn by heart, and then they would just recite them. For our exam, we're only going to learn 3 of them. But actually, Prabhupada himself, he would like to recite the whole ISOPANISAD. So I encourage all of you to actually, you can take like just 10-15 minutes and recite all the mantras every day. And, by the end of the course, you'll know all the mantras, although for the exam, will be only testing you in 3 of the mantras. So I thought to just a little bit enter into the mood, we'll chant this little Mangala Charna invocation. It is a Vedic invocation, and it's an interesting Mangalacharan because two of these lines, each of these lines is not two, each of these lines is the beginning of one of the Vedas. I don't have the reference, unfortunately, but I heard from my teachers, and I couldn't exactly find a reference of, where it's mentioned that each of these first lines is, from different Vedas, the beginning of each Veda. So anyway, so let's chant this. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditatmasu Ma Vidvishavahai. May Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Lord protect us both, teacher and student. May He cherish and nourish us both. May we both work with full energy. May our study be perfect, and may it give us good results. May we never envy one another. Let there be peace and serenity. I really like the meaning of it. And now I'll chant our Mangala Charana. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam. Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Any questions so far? Anybody? This was
Mataji,
introduction to the introduction. Yeah, go ahead.
Can we go to the structure of the Vedic scriptures, that slide?
Yeah.
In this slide, it says the tantras are organized by the gunas. Does that hold true for other aspects as well? For like, for example,
the Puranas I know are also, sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. I don't know about I don't think the Pancharatras are organized like that, and we know that Itihasas are not organized like that. So the Tantras and the Puranas are organized like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm. And
would the same also apply on the left side for the Vedas as well? I've heard that also, but I never ever asked a question about the structure.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
But I've never read the Vedas, so yeah, I don't know. Yeah. If anybody knows the answer, please, unmute yourself and speak. Okay. All right. Anything else?
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Yeah, Hare Krishna.
Please accept my humble obeisances, all wisdom Guru Maharaj and Sri Prabhupada. So Mataji, the left side we are seeing the Shruti as revealing about the absolute truth, right? And Smriti also, the objective is about knowing the absolute truth only, right?
Of course, the whole Vedic knowledge is about knowing the absolute truth. I guess I didn't write it there specifically. Yeah.
I want to, it's only a different way to handle it, right? That is the only thing.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So let's go on. So why is ISOPANISAD important to us? So the Vedic texts, of course, they cannot be understood without the help of a spiritual master. And Prabhupada has done an amazing job actually turning the very complex Vedic texts into practical instructions. it's not easy to understand the Upanishads because the language is very different. Like I said, it's the different kind of Sanskrit, right? And it's the Vedic Sanskrit, and also things are described in contradictory words sometimes, as you will see in the mantras as we go along. And so it's not, and it's very easy to come to like an impersonal conclusion also by reading it. But Prabhupada is really, it's really wonderful. The way the purports are so nice in Ishopanishad. He turns them into really practical instructions, and Prabhupada's bhakti, of course, comes out in each of the purports. He can't stop himself even in the introduction. We already discussed this. And it gives very important definitions of many aspects of Vedic knowledge. And Prabhupada particularly chose to translate Ishopanishad for a few reasons. One is, traditionally, like the jnanis and so on, they only have faith in Shruti, and not in Smriti. So, and like I said, you can draw like impersonal understanding from there. So Prabhupada used Ishopanishad to establish very personal understandings of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And also, there's a tradition in India. To be known as an Acharya, one has to comment on the Upanishads. And Prabhupada chose to comment on Ishopanishad because it's one of the most important Upanishads. And to establish and create faith in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Of course, Bhagavad Gita, we said it's Shruti and Smriti, and more people have faith in Bhagavad Gita in general because it was spoken by the Lord directly. But sometimes people don't have that kind of faith in Bhagavatam. So he establishes and creates this faith, and he defeats impersonalism using this book. You can just use Ishopanishad alone and actually defeat impersonalists. So what is the meaning of Ishopanishad? So when you break up the word, you can break it up in two ways. Isha means the Lord, Upa means near, Ni means certainly, and Sad means to loosen or to destroy or attain. And another way to break the word is Isha, of course, means Lord, Upa means closeness or near, and Nishidati means to bring or sitting close to the Guru. So Prabhupada, if you open to the first page where the title is of the book, you will see the meaning of Ishopanishad or Upanishad, knowledge that brings one nearer to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, like I said, these texts, Upanishads particularly, they're complex to understand, and you really need a guru to understand them. So it's coming closer to the guru, and it's coming closer to the Lord. That's the meaning of Upanishad. And it's confidential knowledge because the guru wouldn't reveal this knowledge just widely to anyone because, knowledge without qualities, as we know, leads to pride, and people can misuse knowledge. So very quickly here, this is a just broad summary of what Ishopanishad describes. It describes the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, how everything material and spiritual is related with him. To be aware of this or to be Krishna conscious is the platform for a successful, happy life, whereas ignorance of him and his plan in any form will lead to the contrary. And if one dedicates his life to understanding and realizing him, then by his mercy, he may reveal himself and one can go back to Godhead. And finally, the last few verses, really beautiful verses, it culminates in the speaker's heartfelt surrender at the lotus feet of the Lord and his appeal for the Lord's supreme mercy. And he speaks, please remove this glaring effulgence so that I can see the form behind. So just from that verse, we can show that the Lord is a person, he's not impersonal. And this is a lecture. So this introduction to Ishopanishad, this is a lecture that Srila Prabhupada gave at Conway Hall, as you see, on October 6, 1969. And Conway Hall is like a really big, large hall, and not too many people had shown up. And devotees were apologizing that we're really sorry, Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, no problem. Didn't you see? Brahma came, Narada came, and they were hearing Ishopanishad. And of course, the devotees became really happy. But one practical point from there is that if you have an option between a large space or a small space for a class, choose a smaller space. Enough to accommodate the people, but smaller space is much more warmer and intimate. Another time also devotees organized for a class in Carnegie Hall, and also not too many people showed up. And Prabhupada said, maybe you should have charged something. So I'm happy now Deep Sachi Mataji is charging something for this class here. So Srila Prabhupada's purports are wonderful. The purports are much longer than in Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam. They run a few pages. And one devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, because when you read these purports, you can see that you'll find Krishna in every verse. And so one devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, how come you put Krishna in this verse, even though there's no Krishna mentioned at all? And Srila Prabhupada said, yes, that's my expertise, to show how Krishna is there in every verse of the Vedic literature. And then Prabhupada said, if one is an ABC translator, it's very difficult to get the essence. So by Prabhupada's mercy, we will also find Krishna in every mantra here. So here's a little, now we're actually getting into the introduction. Overview of introduction. We may not finish the introduction today, so introduction, invocation may take a little longer, and then we will do 2 mantras each week, 2 or more. So I hope to finish 9 or 10 weeks. We'll see how it goes. So overview of introduction, and this is a nice study method also. Whenever you read like a longer purport, try always to categorize it, like what are the main points being made. So just catch them. So here, Srila Prabhupada in the introduction, he establishes the definition and necessity of Vedas, the conclusion of Vedas that absolute truth is a person, the methods of acquiring real knowledge, the need to take guidance from Vedas, the position of Ishopanishad, which we already discussed. Prabhupada discusses that in the last 2 pages. It's directly Vedic literature being part of Shruti. And Vedas are the desired tree. And he also discusses about the essence of the Vedic literature, which is Srimad Bhagavatam. So Prabhupada is giving this class to the public out there, right? People who don't have a clue about anything in the Vedic literature. They don't know what are the Vedas and so on. How does Prabhupada start? He just goes straight into it. He says, what are the Vedas? And he says, the Sanskrit verbal root of Veda can be interpreted variously, but the purport is finally one. Veda means knowledge. Any knowledge you accept is Veda, for the teachings of the Vedas are the original knowledge. And then what does he say in the next sentence? He says, in the conditioned state, our knowledge is subjected to many deficiencies. The difference between a conditioned soul and a liberated soul is that the conditioned soul has 4 kinds of defects. So very quickly, Prabhupada just goes to say that basically, we are foolish, we don't have knowledge, and we need some help. So Prabhupada is creating some humility within the people, right? And humility is the first item of knowledge, as Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita in the 13th chapter, right? So when we are speaking to people, it's very important that we make that connection. First of all, we must really want to give something, and then see what people need, and create the awareness for the need of this knowledge, create humility in some way. So I'd like you to reflect in your own life for a moment when you first started Krishna consciousness. Was there some sense of humility in you, or was it created by someone when you actually heard this knowledge? Take a moment and reflect, and then maybe a couple of you can share also. So either were you in a space where you felt humbled? Oops, what is that? I have no idea how that came. Anyways.
Mataji, can I just tell you how to, so normally the person who's sharing the screen, if you go to security, there is an option to uncheck annotate. Just click on security. So what you may have to do is you may have to stop sharing and start sharing again and change the security settings.
It's all right.
Yeah.
Okay, annotate. In annotate? No.
Yes, you can go to security. I'm not seeing that option because you're sharing the screen. Just click on security. At the very bottom, there should be an option for prevent. There's a check boxes. So you just uncheck the one that says annotate.
Unshared content. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll leave it as it is for now. It's okay, I guess. It's just a little line. You can still see it. Unless you want me to stop and reshare. I can do that.
Yeah, if you stop and reshare, it will disappear.
Okay. All right. There we go. Always learning something. Okay. So anybody would like to share their reflection? Nobody? No volunteers?
So I think at least for me, initially when I was attending the Bhagavad Gita classes, I don't think the word humility ever was at the forefront of my mind. It was more curiosity about what is the Bhagavad Gita about. I think only when you get, at least for me personally, when you get deeper into studying the scriptures, maybe here and there you get an understanding of what humility really means. And I think humility really comes to the forefront when you have to preach. Then you realize how much you don't know actually in the process of preaching.
So you're talking about deeper levels of humility.
Yes.
But I was just speaking about, just the sense that I don't know it all. Like you said, curiosity. And that also means that there's a sense inside that, okay, I don't know it. Let me try to find out. Let me be curious about what else is there. That's a kind of humility also, right?
Sure, yes.
Yeah. Anyone else? Just a quick reflection, just to make everything that we are hearing very practical.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hi, Bill.
Humility from the real humility from a Krishna conscious point of view is practicing devotional service. When we are practicing devotional service, we are not satisfied and still we want to do more and more devotional service.
Okay, that's humility, right? Perhaps my question was not very clear, and that's why the answers are not exactly answering my question, although they're wonderful answers about what humility is. I think my question had to do with just how Prabhupada is creating a certain humility in the audience here. So my question was, when we started Krishna consciousness, did we have some sense of humility inside? within us, or was that sense of humility created by someone? That's all I was asking. But let's move on now because of time. So Prabhupada then goes on to speak about the 4 defects of conditioned soul. So the first defect is the tendency to commit mistakes and to err as human, like we say. So what is the example Srila Prabhupada gives? Quickly, Prabhupada gives the example of Mahatma Gandhi. Yeah. So Mahatma Gandhi, he did not hear the warning of his death. Actually, the day before the actual death of Mahatma Gandhi, the same person tried to kill him, or the same people, tried to kill him, but they made a mistake. Mahatma Gandhi, he had this practice of walking back, between his residence and temple at a set time. And they thought of actually just leaning over the wall and shooting him, but they didn't realize that the wall was very high. And the guy who came to kill Mahatma Gandhi actually fell down, and he even dropped his gun and he ran away. And the guard actually came to check and he found the gun, but so they knew that there was an assassination attempt. So Mahatma Gandhi was warned, but he did not hear. And next day, the same person came and, just from 1 meter distance, he shot him. So Prabhupada gives example of Mahatma Gandhi because he's a great person. He's revered as someone great even to this day. And he also had huge intelligentsia around him. But such a great person, but even great persons make mistakes. And we make mistakes, why? Because of misjudgment. We cannot see the whole reality. Only Krishna knows the complete reality at any point of time. And we don't. So we don't understand the complete reality. And therefore, we don't judge. We can't figure out the situation properly. And we make a misjudgment and we make a mistake. And so it's really not a big deal to accept that we make mistakes because we are human. And we can think of how we react when someone points our mistakes. We can react very badly and we can become defensive and so on. But actually, there's nothing wrong in making mistakes. You can just simply say, yeah, thank you for letting me know. I'm human. Very simple. We can keep it at that. The next defect that Prabhupada talks about is the tendency to be illusion, pramada. So what is illusion? And Prabhupada gives the classic example of thinking that we are the body. So this is the root of all illusion, and thinking that this material world is permanent. Like in mathematics, there are these sometimes like calculus. When I was in school, I used to really like calculus. I would get books outside of my syllabus and just, solve these complex calculus problems. And sometimes I would make a mistake in the first or second step. And of course, then I would go on for pages with it. And then I wouldn't reach the answer because the foundation is wrong. And so when we think we are the body, which is the foundation, then everything else that we think based on that, it's all going to be wrong, right? So we are in big illusion. And again, just observe if somebody brings to our notice that, we're a little bit in Maya, little illusion, can't see things clearly. How do we react to it? Well, we can just accept that, yes, I'm illusion. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. And the next defect is the cheating propensity, vipralipsa. It's described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, these Sanskrit names. So how does Prabhupada define cheating propensity? He says, one poses himself as intelligent. So a teacher who relies on his own senses or mind or intelligence, and he's a cheater. Srila Prabhupada says that transmission of defective knowledge is actually cheating. And Prabhupada would often say that there's very little difference between cheat and teach, actually has the same letters. So we should all know that we all have cheating propensity within us, and we should catch ourselves doing it. And we may not normally do it, consciously, but when there is a situation, that's conducive, then that cheating tendency may actually come out. So what is the worst kind of cheating that we can do? Anybody? What is the worst kind of cheating? It's not a trick question.
We think we are the doers.
Okay.
Cheating ourselves.
Cheating ourselves, yes. Cheating ourselves is the worst kind of cheating. Why it's the worst? Because no one else can then save us, because we're just cheating ourselves, right? And how do we cheat ourselves? We cheat ourselves by not accepting the truth and by, turning our back on Krishna. Turning our back on Krishna is the greatest cheating, actually. And what's at the core of cheating? At the core of cheating is just that I want to put a little effort and get much more than that. That's at the core mentality of cheating. I don't want to put enough effort. I want something easily and quickly. And, the whole gambling, that's what it is. Not willing to put, what it takes. You just want to get more. So maybe we can all, try to identify some areas that we may be regularly cheating ourselves in, or even others sometimes. And if you can identify even like one of them and actually think of how you will work on it, that would be very nice. Yeah. Patch yourself, with this cheating propensity. And then finally, the fourth defect is imperfect senses. Karana patava. So our senses, they're not independent. They're dependent on many factors, and therefore they're not reliable. And Prabhupada gives the example of the sun, of how the sun looks like a disk, but it's actually very huge. And in other places, Prabhupada gives the example of, or our Shastra actually gives the example of seeing the moon behind the branch of a tree. The child wants to see the moon, and the mother shows the moon either in reflection, or sometimes the Shastras will describe the moon as behind the branch of the tree. And there are many, many things we all know that we cannot see or perceive or feel or hear, right? Because we just simply don't have senses that can see certain things. Like we cannot see the viruses or the bacteria. We cannot see the atoms. We cannot see the electronic waves. Srila Prabhupada says that we cannot even see our own eyelids, right? We cannot see what's behind the wall. As soon as there is, a little distance from something, we cannot see that object, right? We cannot see the mind, we cannot see the soul, we cannot see certain colors, but there are certain animals that can hear and see beyond the range that we can see. And each of us also, we have, like each individual, we have a different kind of sensitivity of senses, right? So each of us perceive a little differently too. And actually the scientists know that our senses are imperfect. And the fact, we know this from the fact that they keep changing the theories every few years, and they trust the microscope or telescope, rather than the eyes. And then they have to make a new microscope with more, refinement to it. Pilots, they trust their machines rather than their eyes, So we can see even just from common sense and intuition that actually our senses are very imperfect. So these are the four, so it's mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela 7:107, these four defects of the conditioned soul. So Prabhupada, I have a little homework exercise actually here for you. Oh, we did this already somehow. Yeah, I didn't put the slide in the right place, or I spoke about it before. Okay. So then, therefore, what does Prabhupada say after this? Therefore, we accept the Vedas. And Prabhupada taught us that knowledge is only as good as its source. Right? If we don't have the right source, our knowledge is only as good. So then he goes on. So any questions so far before I go into this? Quite clear, I think.
So Mataji, on the cheating propensity, just, I mean, the answer may seem obvious, but just to clarify. So anything that is done on the platform of spirituality cannot be considered cheating, because, for example, Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that of all the processes, bhakti yoga is simple and easy. So, little input, maximum output, or little effort, maximum return. So I assume anything that is done on the spiritual platform, even though one may have an inclination initially to accept that this process is simple and easy and will yield the maximum results for me, I assume that that is not cheating oneself. That's just faith in the Lord's words.
Yes, and it's also intelligence. It's also intelligence that we want the shortest route to where we want to go. We don't want to take a long route. That would be foolishness, right? So it's intelligence to want the short route, but using that intelligence and making the proper efforts. That's what we're talking about. Cheating means that we don't want to make the effort and we simply want the result, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the little difference is in the intention, right? Yeah. Yeah.
So even in bhakti in the beginning, the intent may not be pure. You're just looking for any result is better than no result.
Yeah, but you're not trying to cheat, You're
True.
attracted to the idea that, wow, like when I heard first time about the Mahamantra and Lord Chaitanya, how he came to give this very easy process, I was just, attracted instantly. Wow, I don't need to do XYZ things that I used to do. I can just simply chant the holy name, and there's just one book, like Prabhupada writes in the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, he quotes from the ISOPANISAD, right? Let there be one book and one religion and so on, right? One mantra. So it's very attractive. So that's not cheating. That's not cheating. See, not having purity is different from actually cheating. Your intent may be proper, but you may not have purity in your heart, and that's okay. The purity will come as we keep practicing bhakti. That you studied that also in Nectar of Devotion, the definition of pure devotional service. The definition of pure devotional service, there's the primary part and the secondary part of the definition. The primary is anukulyena Krishna anushilanam, right? I may still not have purity. Purity is anyabhilashita sunyam and jnana karmadi anavritam. Okay, I may still have some covering. I may still be attracted to karma, jnana, whatever. But, I'm practicing bhakti. So the primary part is more important. The purity will come later. You got it? So intent may be in proper place, but we may not have the full purity of our heart, and that's okay. That's not cheating. We're just trying. That's all. We're not mature. That's what it means.
Hare
All
Krishna
right.
Mataji, could I ask a question?
Yes.
So
Nanda
so
Kumar.
in the previous slide, you said, therefore we accept Vedas.
Mhm.
I think internalizing that, given the limitations that we have, as you described earlier, like looking for proof, looking for evidence, because we are
Yes.
conditioned to think in certain way. So how to internalize that we believe Vedas truly, uh, and thereby understand and practice them.
Yeah, it's coming up. It's coming up. Stay tuned.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. So Prabhupada is going to tell us why we should accept the Vedas now, and he'll go into the whole different pramanas, of how do we get the knowledge, what are the different ways of getting the knowledge, and so on, and what is the right means. So it's coming up. I'm not sure if you read the introduction already, but we'll discuss.
Yes, I read the introduction. Yes.
You read it. Okay. So we will get the proof now of why we should accept the Vedas. So after describing the 4 defects, Prabhupada just says, therefore we accept the Vedas as they are. And he says, you may call the Vedas Hindu, but Hindu is a foreign name. We're not Hindus. So then he just speaks a little bit about Varnashram system. And so what is he establishing through that first? What is the first, what's he saying? Vedas are what? They are?
Knowledge.
What is the point he's trying to make by sharing that, it's not just Hindu thing, and then our real identification is Varnashram and so on? What is he trying to say? He's trying to say that the Vedas are actually universally applicable. Yeah, it's not just for one division of the society or another. It's not just a Hindu thing. Actually, they're universally applicable. And then he speaks about how the Vedas are axiomatic truth. What's an axiom? Anybody knows? Quickly look up what's the dictionary definition of an axiom. What's an axiom? I think I have a slide for it later. But what is an axiom?
Is it irrefutable?
Yeah, it's like an independent truth. It doesn't need support of anything else, right? And it is a truth that is truth at all times. That's an axiomatic truth. And there cannot be any mistake, Prabhupada says. So the Vedic principles are accepted as axiomatic truth. And then he says that is acceptance. And what's the example he gives for that? He gives the example of cow dung. So cow dung, normally, you don't think it's something very pure, right? I mean, any kind of stool is abominable. Like, in fact, if you touch stool, we are supposed to take a bath. But cow dung is the only kind of stool that, it's an antiseptic. It's very pure. We actually, when we moved into this house, because this house was used by someone else, we actually got some cow dung and mixed it in water and, diluted it a lot, of course. And then I kind of, rubbed all the cabinets and everything, the whole kitchen, the floor, everything to purify it with cow dung. It's so purifying, but any other dung is, and then this Calcutta scientist, he actually did research and found that this is actually true, that cow dung has antiseptic properties. So also, I don't know here or where that Prabhupada gives an example of also conch shells. Conch shells is a bone of an animal. And normally bones are impure, but then conch shell is very pure. In fact, we blow a conch shell before every arti, before any yajna and so on, because it drives away everything inauspicious. So these are truths, and truths independent of anything else. And they cannot be interpreted. They are just, true in all phases of time. And they're divine or aparishaya. They're not of human origin. So these are just points from the purport. If you've read it, you know it already. And they're acquired by hearing. We spoke about that earlier. And it's not experimental knowledge. And Prabhupada gives the example of how the Vedas are like a mother. So if you want to know who your father is, then you ask your mother. You don't have to experiment. You don't have to, do like gene studies and all that of all the men out there. You may never reach the conclusion of actually who's your father. But if you just ask your mother, then she will tell you who the father is. It's not experimental knowledge, like a mother. And it's available from the beginning of time, has no defects, therefore accepted as they are. And it's authoritative. Authoritative means that, there is power in those words. Anytime there's an authority, authority has power, right? The mantras, example is sometimes given of mantras being authoritative. When we chant the Vedic mantras, something happens. There's a certain potency. There's so many examples in the Bhagavatam and so on of like sages cursing, right? And there's power in that curse. Maharaj Parikshit was cursed. Or a judge. Judge is an authority in this world, and when he passes a judgment, his judgment prevails, and you have to follow it. There's power. So Vedas are actually the power of God, and they're full of power. He is the supreme authority, and whatever the Vedas say, it happens. It's authority, so it happens. It's true, and they're absolute, meaning not relative. The truth is truth in all phases of time and places. It's original knowledge, and it's pure. And here was my slide on axiom. I'm going to quickly go to it. Any self-evident truth that requires no proof, universally accepted principle or rule. So now to the question that Nanda Kumar asked, how can we be sure that Vedas tell the truth? So, any volunteers? How can we be sure that Vedas tell the truth? You just heard some things, but now somebody like Nanda Kumar will ask you out there, how can we be sure? How will you convince them?
Hare Krishna, Mataji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Mataji, I think you mentioned the points already that Prabhupada gives examples about the cow dung and then the conch shell, and also various points on the scriptures which are mentioned we find to be correct. So that is one thing. With practical realizations also we can see that, yeah, whatever is mentioned, it is perfect.
Yeah, very good. So direct evidence, right? And so some people will say, well, proof that the Vedas are the truth is that God spoke them, and therefore it's truth. And the Vedas say that God, is the supreme, right? So this can be a little bit of a circular reasoning according to logic, right? Krishna is God. He says that Vedas come from him, and Vedas say that Krishna is God. So sometimes this kind of logic is really not enough. And that's why we really want to be convinced so that we can convince others, right? So a few points you mentioned. So we can take testimony from those who have applied the Vedas, right? Modern society where, there is no application of any Vedas, it's just degrading at a rapid rate. But those who actually follow the Vedas, they are elevated. So there is a positive result. And we can see that even in our own lives as devotees, when we apply ourselves, how quickly our consciousness gets lifted, right? And when we slacken in our application, very quickly our consciousness goes down, right? So it works, it really works. And then there's the direct evidence of how chanting of the mantras works, and also the predictions from the Vedas, like, like the earth was round, or, the whole field of embryology, it was all spoken of, what happens at, when the fertilization happens, and on the second day and third day and so on. Right in the Bhagavatam, it's described also. So this was spoken of in the Vedas, and ultrasound came much, much later. And it's all true, right? The description of embryo is exactly the same. And even reincarnation was spoken of in the Vedas, and now it's proved through research. And many, many intelligent people have also accepted the Vedas, as Prabhupada writes. I think it's on page 6. Well, we have different editions of the book, so it may not be the same page for you. But Prabhupada writes there, all classes, the impersonalists, the Vaishnavas, they've all accepted the Vedas from time immemorial. So we should know these things to convince others. There's something on the chat. And we can, okay. Vedas are revealed by the Lord. Same thing I was saying. So are there some things that are really hard to believe that are in the Vedas? There are some things that are really, really hard to believe in the Vedas. Like one time, Srila Prabhupada was lecturing and speaking about giant eagles, flying to a different planet and eating a whole horde of elephants for their breakfast. And everybody was looking at each other. This was like the first time they saw their spiritual master in that place, and this is what he spoke. And the devotees were kind of looking at each other, and Prabhupada asked any questions. And then one devotee, very hesitatingly, slowly, he raised his hand, and he articulated with great difficulty and asked the question with some courage and nervousness, of course. And he said, Prabhupada, you said that there are giant eagles that fly from planet to planet and they eat elephants. This is hard to believe. And Prabhupada said, yes, what do you know? You haven't even come out of the womb of your mother. And what Prabhupada meant by that is that, we're really, in the womb of material nature, we're so covered by illusion. What do we know? And our tendency is that the moment something doesn't fit in our frame of reference, we just reject it. We don't accept it. We just, say, okay, this is not for me because this doesn't fit in based on what I know so far, what I've heard so far. It doesn't fit my perception. So or my frame of reference, and I don't accept it. So we shouldn't do that. There's another example. This I heard from one of my teachers. It's her example. But, in the Bhagavatam, in the 5th canto, we hear how in the lower planets, there's no light. And the only light in those lower planets is the light that comes from the jewels on the head of Anantashesh, the snake, the big snake. And that's quite puzzling, right? It's like, how can that be the only light? And she was supposed to teach this verse to the students, and she was thinking, I have such a hard time accepting it. Krishna, give me some realization of how I can explain this verse. So she was just walking back, and on the way, she just saw like some fireflies everywhere. And she thought, wow, these little flies are emitting light. So how, it's very much possible then that the only light on the lower planets is the light coming from the jewels on the head of Anantashesh. So why can't it be true? And Anantashesh is no ordinary person. He is Balaram. So surely it's true. So when something doesn't fit our frame of reference as we are reading Shastra, don't reject it and don't dismiss it right away. Even it doesn't fit. We should just accept it and try to see how, it can be true. So how to process these contradictions in the Vedas? One thing is that, there's a principle and then there's a detail, or some things are true in general, and then there are exceptions, right? So Prabhupada said that first we should accept the Shastra, and then we should find out how it is true. And the classic example, perhaps you've all heard, is when Krishna says Krishna is the taste of water. Prabhupada says, you accept that Krishna is the taste of water, and then you try to find out how it's true. And sometimes this process of finding out is not just through logic or something, but there's much prayer needed. There's some patience needed. There's openness of heart needed, some humility needed. And then maybe Krishna will reveal how it's true, right? Just like he revealed to this teacher of mine. So I'm looking at the time, and I think this may be a good place to pause. We will discuss the different ways of acquiring knowledge, and we'll do the invocation also in the next class. And then we'll get into the mantras. But let's see if there's any questions or comments or corrections.
I just wanted to thank you, Mataji, for the explanation. That was very, very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone? Any comments, reflections?
Nice class, Mataji. I'm just looking forward Mataji. It's very clear and yeah, it's really good one. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhu. Mani Kandan, Prabhu. Okay.
Hare
Anyone
Krishna
else?
Mataji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Your PPT is very informative and we can able to understand very easily. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhu. I'm very much like a child, so I just need everything laid out very simply for me to understand. So that's the way I share the knowledge with others. Okay. If there's nothing else, then we can end here. It's 11:30 here, and it's 9 o'clock in India. Time to go to bed and wake up for Mangalarti.
Okay. May I know where you are located, Mataji?
I am located in Florida, Alachua,